And welcome back to the show. So I'm excited about my guest for today, Billy Daniel, because Billy is not just a successful real estate investor, he is also a successful real estate agent and the owner of his own real estate brokerage. So Billy's going to be sharing with us today what it's like to be a successful business owner in the industry of real estate. He has coached, mentored, and educated a lot of other real estate agents, investors, and broker owners as well using his experience and his background. So, Billy, man, welcome to the show. Super excited to have you join us today and share a little bit about what it is that you can offer as far as value to other real estate entrepreneurs.
Yeah, Kobe. First off, I appreciate you having me. This is great. I love coming on these shows and kind of sharing my experiences and hopefully encouraging other real estate agents or investors or anybody just thinking about it to kind of get into the game because, for me, it's been very exciting. It's been very rewarding, and I've loved every minute of it. Well, I should say I loved almost every minute of it. So I started investing in real estate in 2018. We bought our first house, was a 3 bed, 2 bath, just over 1,400 square feet, and we got it for $15,000. And it looked like a house that was that big that cost that much money would look like. It was a complete nightmare. Hole in the roof all the way through the dining room floor. We called it our all natural skylight. Vines growing into the windows, the worst, nastiest kitchens and bathrooms I've ever seen. And the kicker was there was a man living there by himself. It was a very sad situation. Just the property was so bad and so unhealthy. I think his family eventually finally got him to kind of go into some assisted living, and they had to get rid of the house. But the neighbors told me some stories about trying to come over and help him clean up, and he refused. He liked the vines growing through his windows because they gave him more privacy, he said. So it was a hard property to get started with. I usually don't recommend new investors start with a property like that. It ended up being a complete remodel, all new mechanicals, everything got touched except for the beams under the foundation. It was a lot of work, but on the other side of that, it was very rewarding to see the final product and to start seeing that money, that cash flow finally start coming in with a when a renter moved in. And then from there, we just kind of grew, bought a few more houses, most of them in pretty close to the same condition as that one. Um, my wife has been a licensed agent since well before that. Uh, and so we kind of got the inside scoop on properties. Uh, Eventually, she wanted to open her own brokerage, so we combined forces and did that. I left my full-time job and burned the ship, so to speak, in the end of 2021, and started our brokerage, and that's where we are today, just continuing to work through this challenging real estate market that I think everybody's kind of dealing with the last couple of years, and hoping for a good upswing in the market here in the next 12 to 24 months.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, man. So you mean the way you guys started out investing in real estate is so, it's so cool, right? Because I'm sure for you guys it was just a lot of work, but people will look at, will look at kind of your story from the outside looking in and say, man, like I would love to buy a property for that cheap, right? And be able
Yeah.
to flip it or turn a rental property, but they don't understand the amount of stress and work that goes into a rehab. So if you don't mind just kind of walking us through that, right? What are some of the things that when you're looking at new investors, what do you like to tell them as far as, hey, these are the things you need to watch out for. These are the risks, and this is what we have to deal with. It might look like, a great deal on paper, but this is the kind of work that you have to put in order to actually, turn a profit and not lose money.
Sure. I always encourage investors to start investing in themselves first. Before you go out and buy that first property, spend some time on some podcasts, find these investing podcasts, find these books, and I have a list of books I would recommend to everybody, like kind of get your mindset right and kind of give you a better idea of what you're getting into. Um, and then when it comes to finding the properties, I've helped several new investors buy their first property, and it's kind of always the same. It's like, oh, this is going to be so much work. This is terrible. I was like, you're not going to do it yourself. You have a full-time job. Let's take it piece by piece and realize that, this big scary thing, when it's broken down, is really not that scary, and it is very manageable. Especially if you have people that can help you, like your investor slash agent or your local real estate investor association, where you have these resources you can leverage to help you get through a complex process. But without a doubt, the biggest hurdle for new investors is the fear and the uncertainty of it all.
Yeah, and I like that, right? You have to invest in yourself before going out there and trying to take on a huge project like that. So, I mean, that's one of the biggest things that we find entrepreneurs, they lack is they don't go out there and they don't invest in themselves. So, you've been in, multiple different avenues of real estate, right? Is that kind of the overarching, I would say, like theme that separates those who are successful and on their way to success versus those who aren't? Is those who are either whether they're an agent, they're a team leader, broker, investor, or maybe they do all of them like yourself. What do you think is the overarching kind of theme for success for them? Is it just being able to take some time and money, invest in themselves?
Yeah, if I think most people, if they're willing to invest in themselves, then they're just naturally going to be able to overcome the fears and the doubts, and they're going to be able to take that first step in action. Um, you know, there are a lot of people who get stuck in that analysis paralysis where they will invest in themselves, but maybe they're not doing it the right way, or they're not getting some guidance from people who've been there and done that. Because there's 1,000 people out there with a quick Google search that'll tell you how easy it is, and this and that, whatever it says. As long as you give them $1,500 for their private course. But whenever you talk to someone local who has done this and has been there, that's what really gets you going, makes you realize, hey, if this person here that is very similar to me can do this, I know that I can do it too. So there's the education in the piece, but then there's kind of that mentorship, inspiration that comes with your network.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, you want to go out there and you want to make sure that you have the right support and you have the right resources in order to help you be successful in your business, right? Whatever that might be. So, let's talk a little bit about kind of your journey, right? Because you guys are, you and your wife are the owners of your own brokerage. You guys are real estate agents and also investors. There's a lot of people out there who are either doing one or the other. They're just an agent. They will not really think on the investor side, and there's investors who says they'll never be an agent. What was it that kind of made you guys do both, and how are you guys able to juggle both sides of the business and really make it successful for both yourself as investors, but also representing others as the agent as well?
Getting into investing in real estate, uh, it was really more about control, honestly. Whenever you go and you buy a rental property, a house, or a small multifamily or whatever it is, you really have a lot of control over the success or failure of that investment. Now, there's always things you can't control, right? But you can control what type of property it is. You can control the condition of the property. You can control the rent, whatever it is. You have the ability to take control of that investment and make sure it goes the direction you want to go. And so I would look at things like investing in stocks or whatever, and it's like, you send your $10,000, you buy some stock, and then you just kind of sit back and wait and you hope. Essentially, there's really nothing you can do to make sure that Google's price goes up. No, it's either going to go up or go down. There's nothing you can do about it. I was like, well, you could take that same 10,000 and go and buy a little $50,000 property somewhere, with some leverage from the bank, and now you have control over your investment, and you can really help. You can really impact the outcome of that investment. So that's really what got us into real estate investing, was just being able to kind of drive our own ship, towards what our future looks like financially. And to get to your question about agents and investing, there's so many agents that don't do it, and it honestly baffles me. We sit back as agents and we talk to our clients, and you'll see agents on social media all the time post about, well, renting is, you're paying 100% interest whenever you're renting versus 6% when you're buying. You see that stuff all the time, and you're like, you're telling your buyers to do something, but you're not even doing it yourself. Like, you should be investing in real estate. You're out there marketing it. Real estate is a good investment. Like, why aren't you investing in it? And it baffles me. And last year at our franchise conference, I was a breakout speaker, and I talked about real estate investing, and the room filled up, and there, I think maybe 150 agents in the room. And first question I asked was who owns investment real estate, and I maybe got 30% of the hands went up. So on one hand, it's kind of discouraging that there was so few, but on the other hand, it was encouraging because so many people came and they wanted to learn how to do it. And from what I've heard, a couple were inspired to, but it just baffles me how a real estate agent with such in-depth knowledge and experience in this market and can see how things go refuse to take some time to invest in themselves and their own future with a rental property or something along those lines.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's a well, you see a lot of that with agents, right, who are not investing in real estate. What have you found to be the reason behind that? Why are they not going out there and investing and really kind of doing what it is that they preach to their clients all the time?
I think there's two factors, one of which may be a little controversial. Uh, what is, as an agent, our income can fluctuate quite a bit. And it's easy for a lot of agents, because most agents are not top producers, most agents are not consistent producers even. So it's really easy to survive the down times and then just really enjoy the high times. And then by the time you have the downtime, you got no money left. So I think it's hard for a lot of agents to put that money aside for a down payment or whatever it is they need to get into a rental property. And the second reason, which may be controversial, is I think the natural personalities of the most successful agents means that they like to have a good time and they don't spend a lot of time investing in their future because honestly, unless you enjoy numbers and finances, it's kind of boring. I mean, the day to day is pretty boring, and agents work hard, and by their nature, the most successful ones are the fun loving ones in most situations. So that's where their money tends to go. But I think it's hard to set the money aside and then to spend that money on the boring stuff like, analyzing a rental property. But that's maybe a little controversial, but in my experience, that's kind of what I see for those who don't have investment properties.
Yeah, and I think for agents, right, they want to kind of invest in their image as well, especially if you're like a high producer, if you're targeting a specific market or a specific niche, right? You kind of want to invest in your image and maybe spend a little bit of money, be in certain rooms, right,
Yeah.
for your business on the sales side as well. But I mean, so what have you guys been able to do as far as combining the two, right? I think that's the important part because I think a lot of agents, though, like even if they're top producers, they did you say I don't have time to go out there look for investment properties? I don't want to take away from what I'm currently doing that's producing the actual income. How have you guys been able to, not necessarily sacrifice the real estate sales business, the active income side, but continue to be able to build your rental portfolio? Because I mean, just from the outside looking in, it should be a very kind of synergistic business, right? Being in sales and real estate and also investing yourself.
Yeah. And I personally really enjoy the investing side of things. My wife slash business partner, she enjoys the buy sell side of real estate. So for us personally, we kind of do take the divide and conquer approach, where she will help people in the buy and sell, then I'll help the investors, and I'll worry about the investment properties. All of our property managers contact me. Like it's kind of that, it's that, it's that method for us. And realize a lot of agents maybe they don't have that two-headed monster, so to speak, that can go after out there. No, so I think it goes back to reaching out to your network and understanding your network. Uh, Reaching out to people who have properties. If you want to invest in a property, you need to talk to people who have invested in properties. I always encourage people to look up their local RIAs. I started the one here in our local area, and I've got several clients out of that meeting, but I've also seen a lot of people really up their investing game going through that meeting and investing in themselves. But to get back to your question, us personally, we always make the joke like I don't like to help people figure out where they're going to put their Christmas trees. That's her job. She loves that part of the business. But as soon as someone starts talking to her about uh, returns and expenses, she zones out. She's done. But me, on the other hand, I could run numbers all day long, and I love it. So we do have an advantage, and we do utilize that advantage. Uh, but yeah, it's just a balancing game, and I think for the typical single agent trying to figure this out, it's just deliberate action. Like, you gotta time block the schedule if you need to. Whatever you got to do, you got to make this the time you're going to focus on your investing, and this the time you're going to focus on your buy sell. And you just got to be deliberate, and you got to be committed and disciplined.
Yeah. And that's the hardest part, right? I think any business is being disciplined enough to go out there and either start something new or to invest in your marketing strategy, your marketing tactic, right? Whatever that might be. That's one of the hardest parts for an agent or anybody to go out there and do successfully as well. So it means that's something you guys have seen people do as well as far as like the single agent.
Yeah, and it is hard. That's why there's so much uh success for coaches and trainings and things like that that help people with time management and things like that. And I'm not knocking it at all. My wife has a business coach, and it's been amazing. Um, but it is hard. It is a very difficult thing to do. And for some people, if you can't sit down and deliberately follow your own schedule and be in control of your time, then it is a good option for you to find some kind of accountability. It doesn't need to be something you pay for. It may be another agent in your office with the same struggle, and y'all meet on Mondays and Fridays and say, here's what I'm doing this week, and here's what I did this week. And here, and did you do it or not? Now you got to tell somebody you failed to follow your own calendar, and you're more likely going to stick to it next week.
Yeah. So finding an accountability partner, right? How important is that? Just having somebody there, because you mentioned like you don't necessarily have to go out there and hire a coach, but you want to make sure there's actually somebody there to hold you accountable. So is that something that you guys have implemented as well in your business and have seen agents who have implemented this? Have you seen there's been I guess a higher level of success? The ones who maybe they're in a community, maybe they're just in a Facebook group and they're sharing what it is that they're doing versus the one who are kind of siloed off and doesn't necessarily have the right support and the right peers around them to kind of make sure that they're doing the right things every day.
Yeah, we can see it. So one thing we do in our office with our agents is every Tuesday morning we have a sales meeting, which I think a lot of offices do something very similar. But the first thing we talk about every week are our wins from the last week. So whatever your wins are, not necessarily real estate related, though 99% of the time they are. Excuse me. But so that's it's not called accountability, but if you know that on Tuesday morning your broker is going to say, "All right, Billy, what were your wins for last week?" You better have some wins. So it only takes 1 week for you to say, I don't have anything. And then you're going to change the way you are before that next meeting, right? So it's not called accountability. We don't address it as accountability. But if you know someone's going to ask you, so what did you do right last week? You better have an answer, right? So that's what we've implemented in our office. And I would say that our agents are above average in our market. Um, and production wise, and I think that's a big reason why is it's that hidden accountability, but it's also a truly, hey, this is going right for us, let's focus on the positive and the growth. Hey, excuse me. But I think that's been a big key to our agent success, and that kind of falls in line with what you're saying.
Right. I like that because I mean, if you're kind of put on the spot, right, and told that, hey, let's share something that you did this past week that was a success, that was a win, then there's always something that you have to kind of come up with. And I do like the positive aspect of that as well because there's sometimes could be situations where you as the individual, as the agent, maybe had a win, but you didn't because you were so hard on yourself or whatever, didn't necessarily see that as a win either. So it kind of forces you to have the opportunity to really go back to your week this past week and fish out like what it is that I did that was successful, what it is that I did that was moving me forward, and that was also intentional in alignment with my goals as well. Is that something that you guys have kind of seen as well? Is that it kind of forces people to maybe pick out something positive from their business and bring it to light?
Yeah, and it's easy to focus on the bad things, right? The transaction that falls through after inspection or financing or whatever. It's easy to focus and kind of get down on that because oh, that's a commission check that was lost. That's a client that's unsatisfied, whatever it is. No, but to keep the focus on the wins, like, look, we even say it big, small, we want to hear them all. That's kind of what we say. And if your win is, man, I made 5 phone calls last week that I didn't want to make. Nice. You did it. Right. That's your win. Let's move forward. Let's carry that momentum. Can you do 7 this week? It's just kind of it's a momentum builder, and it's to keep us out of the negative, because once you start focusing on that negative, you're kind of putting yourself in a downward spiral, and it's hard to get out of that spiral once you get into it. So we don't like to hear about the bad things in the meeting. The bad things are afterwards. Hey, I've got this problem. Can you help me? Yep, let's work through this thing together. And then maybe that problem turns into your win, right? We had this transaction. It was on its last breath, but we were able to work it out with the listing agent, whatever. And now we're back on track, and everything's great. So if you stay focused on the positive and moving forward, then whenever things get bad like that, it's easy to flip it around and save things and keep things going in the right direction.
Hmm. Yeah, and I like the way you framed that as well, which is, if you had a problem this week, let's turn that around and let's make it your win for next week as well. Because
Mm.
that's the whole point, right? Of having community, having accountability is that we're not ever going to have such a smooth road where there's no challenges or no problems. It's how do we deal with them, right? How do we show up? How do we perceive these issues? Can we turn them into a win? But more importantly, how can we do that? As well. How can we turn this into a win or maybe a lesson?
Yeah, in my pre-real estate life, I had some direct reports, and as one of the things I had as the team leader was, hey, I know you've got problems, but don't come to me with your problems. Come to me with your problems and what you think the best solution is. So let's work the problem and move forward so we can keep going and get reach our goals. And it's the same thing here. It's like, hey, I know there's problems. There's always going to be problems. I don't think we've ever done a transaction without at least some small problem, but let's not focus on the problem. Let's focus on the solution and continue to move forward. And it goes that way whether you're talking your buy sell business or you're talking about your investments. I mean, there's always going to be problems with your investments, whether you're buying it or you already own it and you've got tenants. There's always an issue. All right, here's the issue. Thanks for letting me know. How do we solve it? And let's continue on with our lives.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a lot of potential issues that can come up on the investment side of the business, right? Whether if it's that's
Uh,
pre-tenant or after the tenant has come into your property as well. There's, rehab, there's working with contractors, there's the actual, just before getting into the deal, right? Working with the sellers directly. Now, there's a lot of, I'm sure, investors listening to this as well. You guys are obviously doing both, right? So you're doing the investing and then you also your agents as well. So from an investor's perspective, maybe they're like an active investor, right? Maybe they are flipping houses or they just have a full-time investment business. What value do you see in them going out there and getting licensed? Maybe they do want to become an agent. Maybe they just want to get licensed. Do you see any value in investors getting the real estate license? Does that support them in their business? And does becoming an agent also help them on the investment side as well?
I honestly think it's kind of a double-edged sword. If you're an investor and then you get your license, obviously you have all the same access that your real estate agent does. You don't have to pay any commissions. So that is a big advantage, money wise, but time wise, it doesn't really save you a whole lot because now, as whereas before you would hire an agent, the agent would do all that stuff for you. Well, now you're doing all that stuff. You're getting paid for it, but your time is still being taken up. uh, you also have access to the MLS. You kind of get some inside scoop on these new listings or pocket listings, they're called. You get much better access to other industry professionals. As an investor, it may be a little harder to talk to multiple loan officers, title agents, home inspectors, but with a license and working in an office, you're going to be able to talk to other agents and they'll be able to recommend other people from outside your sphere. Uh, the downside that to having a license, especially if you want to work with other investors, is you kind of take on this duty where you have to put your client's needs ahead of your own. So if I have an investor client who's looking for well, let's say my first property, so a $25,000 property, just completely beat up and ready to go to the ground, right? Uh, if I want that property, I'm kind of obligated to make sure that client wants to pass on it before I can move forward. So I have that duty to put my client's needs ahead of my own. So that can be a downside to it. Now, if you don't work with anybody, you just have your license for your own transactions. I think that's probably an advantage for the investor.
Yeah, and I know a lot of investors who have gotten licensed for that reason as well. They just kind of want to use it for themselves and they want to, save on commissions, have access, and just kind of go through the process, right, of getting licensed and maybe putting it to use, maybe not. But that is a good point that you brought up there, and that is, if you're representing clients that are also investing and they're maybe looking at the same buy box that you are, you have to make sure as a real estate agent representing them, you kind of put their interest first, right? That's your duty as the agent on the transaction. How have you guys been able to kind of navigate that? Have you guys just kind of approached it very upfront, or is there certain clients that you don't work with because you know that there might be a conflict of interest down the line?
Yeah, for ours, if we have find this property we like that suits the client's buy box, we'll send it to them. We'll say, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And we really haven't. I think we've only had one property that a client bought that we wanted. But for the most part, it just kind of usually works out for us. They're like, no, I'm not interested right now, or I'm waiting a couple months before I buy anything, and then it's kind of like the all clear for us. We brought it to their attention, we gave them the opportunity. They said no, so we just jumped on it. So I think it's the right thing to do. I feel like it's good karma, as an agent to say, hey, here's this property that suits what you're looking for. You don't want it, all right, I'm going to buy it just so you know. And they're always like, oh yeah, go for it. I've never had any issues with it at all.
Right, just being upfront, right? Being upfront about
Yep.
it. The clients don't want it, then let them know that you're also an investor, and it does help, I think, right? If you are working with investor clients, that you being an investor yourself, I think that's what a real estate investor who is maybe looking for properties want to look for in a professional agent representing them, right? They know what they want.
Yeah, you got to be able to speak the language and understand the mindset. Yeah, it's if you're dealing with families helping their homes, and all of a sudden you've got a person who all they care about is money, in a good way. It's hard to make that leap. Whenever they say, "Yeah, I don't really need top of the line granite countertops. I don't care about that at all." And so it's hard for some agents to make that leap going from working with families finding their forever homes to an investor who just needs to get a return on their money. So having your own properties, you understand the mindset, you understand the language, and you've got a lot of credibility going into a transaction.
Exactly. That's what really separates the investor-minded agents who can get those clients in that kind of business versus just kind of the regular agent out there who,
Yeah,
surprisingly enough, I don't think there's a ton of agents who actually specializes in working with investors. I'm not
yeah,
sure if that's kind of
that's
what you
yeah,
meant. Well,
yeah. I think it is. The vast minority of agents can really speak to an investor, especially a seasoned investor, and get some messaging across.
mhm. Yeah. So something else I really kind of want to talk to you about is the transition of becoming now the owner of your own brokerage, right? We touched a little bit on kind of what you guys do with your agents and your team, but I've kind of seen a lot of agents struggle going from, being an individual, right, running their own sales business, being a top producing agent even, and just doing a lot of transactions themselves. Maybe they have an assistant or some virtual assistants that they work with, but they've never really been in a position of leadership where they essentially need the agents on their team and their business to outperform their personal sales. So what has that transition been like for you guys going from, essentially individual business owners, kind of, solopreneurs, if you will, to now leading a team and owning and managing your own brokerage, which is in itself a business with multiple systems, multiple nuances that, you have to make sure everything goes right and to support and lead your agent so that way they can go out there and be just as successful, if not more successful than you guys are.
Yeah, it's a challenge. We are fortunate in that we kind of have the same two-headed monster approach to things where uh she's really good at the client facing stuff and by extension the other agents dealing with the other agents and things like that. Whereas my skill set is in nerdery and I can sit behind a computer and do all the finances and the back office work all day long and be happy as a clam. So we have that divide and conquer approach to things where she continues to do what she's good at and I do what I'm good at, and combine our forces combined, we make a decent brokerage. The For a solo agent going and open a brokerage on their own, it's daunting. I feel like just knowing the time that it takes for the two of us to do all the things that we have to do while continuing to buy sell. I don't know how some of these people who start their own brokerages all by themselves do it, especially a small independent, where you're coming up with your own name, all your own systems. Man, it's a lot of work. I have a lot of respect for the people who can do all of that. Uh, but think it if you're a high producing agent and looking to start your own brokerage, I think you have to realize that once those doors are open, there's a lot of work that you don't see, that goes on in the background, just to keep your systems maintained. And then as agents start coming to your office, you start to feel the weight of the responsibility. So now you have a large part in their success. And the fact that if they can't get the right training, or if they can't get the right leads, or they don't understand how to work their business, then you're liable for all that stuff, whether it's their happiness, their family's food on the table, or you're liable in court because they don't know how to write a contract or whatever it is. There's a weight of responsibility that comes with it. um, and then there's the late night phone calls. Uh, some agents, they don't work during the day; they can only work at night whenever their clients are off work, and then they run into problems at 8:30. Well, now you got to take a phone call at 8:45 at night because there's this contract issue and they can't work through this inspection or whatever it is. And you got to help provide some guidance and some learning, but it's almost nonstop. So it's the responsibility of owning the brokerage and being there for your agents and to get to the next level until you can hire, a good assistant or a good sales team manager or whatever it is. But to start off, for most people, I mean, it's a daunting task, and I have a lot of respect for those who do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard transition, right? Being from just
Mhm.
kind of a successful individual to being now a successful business owner and a successful leader as well. So, where have you seen, I guess, like the biggest gaps are for, maybe an individual agent who they do really well, but they just have a really hard time transitioning into being like a successful leader of a team or leading a team that can kind of outperform them.
Yeah, and it's for a lot of top producing agents, the qualities that make someone a top producing agent are not the qualities that make you a good bookkeeper. That's just kind of how it is. And so, I think that's the area that I think a lot of them struggle is they're really good at these income producing activities, the reaching out to clients, the talking to people, negotiations. They're really good at all that stuff. But can they also be good at the same time with managing books and finding new systems and managing the whatever the state real estate commissions requiring of them, while also making sure that anybody who works for them is doing all of that stuff, all of the client engagement, networking, and making sure they're following the state laws. So can you manage all of that stuff while continuing to maintain your same level of production? For a lot of people, they can't. You can't be a top producer up here and then open your own brokerage and think you're going to stay here. without some really strong systems and a really strong support system in place. So I think to go into it, you have to expect that there's going to be a learning curve. It can be done without a doubt, but the drive is going to have to be there to maintain that same level of production while also maintaining a compliant brokerage. Um,
Yeah, and that's a really good point there because as an agent, right, you have the skill sets, like you said, to go out there and talk to people, make sales, and perform at the level that you've been performing at. But owning an actual business where you are liable and responsible for not just your employees, but the agents that you bring on, and also yourself and your own business, right? Making sure the state board, it's your brokerage and the operations are completely compliant with everything that goes on behind the scenes. That's not necessarily the exact same skill set that translates over from being a successful agent, which is going out there and just doing the income producing activities that an agent is known and trained to do successfully on their own. So I think that's the biggest shift in mindset that a lot of agents are having to make if they are ever considering opening up their own brokerage and kind of expanding outside of just their own efforts.
I would say that, having a team, if you're within your brokerage, you start your own team. That's very similar to having your own brokerage, just without all the liability. So we often talk about teams as just being mini brokerages.
Mhm.
If you're a successful producer, maybe it's best to start your team first and develop strong systems for your agents out as a team. And now you've already got half the job complete for opening your own brokerage. So that's always a very good option, I think, for those who are considering brokerage ownership in the future.
Yep, exactly. It's a natural transition, right? Just owning your team and going out there and kind of developing those skill sets as kind of the leader spot instead of just being an individual moving forward. So,
Right. Yeah.
yeah. Well, Billy, man, I appreciate you being on the show today. I think you shared a lot of value with us on not just how to become a successful real estate agent, but also how to transition into becoming a successful leader and a business owner, and also how to be able to run a business in real estate where you are an investor, but also a successful real estate agent as well. So, for anybody out there who was watching or listening to this that want to know a little bit more about what it is that you're doing, and want to know how they can maybe get in contact with you, what are some of the best ways for people to do that? And what are some things that you guys are working on at the moment?
So you can find me on Instagram. I'm at another flipping couple. Our profile picture I've heard is a pretty good one. It's me and my wife with a ridiculous photo shoot we did a couple years ago. A la Masterminds at Galifianakis, if you remember that show. That's probably the best way. It's the one that'll have a whole bunch of pictures of cigars on it. Um, but some things we're working on now. Uh, I run the Real Estate Investors Association here, Real Estate Roundtable. Actually, it's River Valley Real Estate Roundtable on Facebook. Um, Monthly meetings, local specialists come in. Um, Always looking to talk to other people who are a part of other RIAs for ideas and share thoughts on ways to improve the meetings to help your investors locally. So anybody who runs a RIA, I look forward to hearing from them. Or even if you're a part of a RIA and you just love it and you want to share some ideas, I love hearing about that. The last thing that we're kind of just launched last month is a training platform for real estate brokers. So what we've done is we've taken all of our training presentations we've created over the last few years, and we've kind of edited them so that they are fairly neutral. So you could use them in any state since all real estate is governed by state laws. But we've created these presentations that brokers can use to train their agents on all aspects of being a real estate agent. So it's not just lead generation, it's not just contracts, but it's also managing finances and working with your sphere and things that really work to improve an agent's business. We call it business improvement training. So that can be found at trainwithebi.com. The quick presentations that a broker can download. 10 minutes later, they can be teaching the topic to their agents. Um, so it's really aimed at raising the bar for agents across the industry. That's one of the things we set out with when we opened our brokerage is we wanted to raise the bar for agents in our local area. Now this Train with EBI is just an extension of that, trying to take some of these efforts national to help raise the bar for agents and to make sure agents can be more successful in their own businesses.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So I'm really excited to kind of see and dig into a little bit more on what that program offers because it's very unique. And I haven't heard of anything like that in the industry yet. So good on you
Yeah,
guys for coming up with that and really leading the charge there. But Billy, man, appreciate you. We'll make sure to leave the links to what you just mentioned in the description, the show notes down below. So that way you guys can go check out what Billy and his wife are doing and how you guys can be a part of that as well if it sounds like it's something that kind of fits into your business. But other than that, man, is there any last pieces of advice, any last tips you would like to leave with the audience here today before we let you sign off?
yeah. One thing I will say is take the action. Just take the step. Take the next step. Fight your fears. It's not as bad as you think it's going to be. I promise. Whatever that next step is, open a brokerage, buying a first property, buying your next property. Just take that next step. Move forward. Don't worry about the fear. It's going to work itself out.
Yep, absolutely, man. That's some great advice. Billy, thanks again for being on the show. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you on
Thank
the
you.
next show. Take
Thank
care.
you.